everybody. Welcome to my first outing as a CTRL faculty fellow on AI for teaching and research. My name is Derrick Cogburn, and we were kind of laughing a little bit about all the hats that I wear, as you can see on the screen. It's not like I'm too busy or nothing or anything like that, but I keep myself very, very busy. And I really am excited about sharing some of these ideas with you. We're going to talk about prompt engineering, and we're going to talk about RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which may be new for some of you, I hope. So one of the things that I wanted to share at the beginning of this is one of my colleagues in SIS, Betsy Cohen, started a session the other day that I thought was a really profound way. She talked about how many people are feeling overwhelmed by AI and all of the developments that are happening so quickly. So many things are changing. Here I am throwing another acronym at you, RAG, that you might not be familiar with. And it's changing so quickly. And some of us are excited. Some of us are nervous. Most of us are probably in awe of what we are seeing and what can happen these days. So she said, love it, hate it, you can't ignore it. And that's really the thing that we're wrestling with here is, you can't ignore these changes. So I wear a number of hats here on campus. I have a joint appointment between the School of International Service and the Department of Environment, Development, and Health, and in the Kogod School of Business in the Department of Information, Technology, and Analytics. I also hold the UNESCO Associate Chair in Transnational Challenges and Emerging Nations Dialogues. I am the Executive Director of AU's Institute on Disability and Public Policy, and I also share the role as Faculty Co-Director with my wonderful colleague who I see online, Nanette Levinson, as the Internet Governance Lab Co-Director, Co-Faculty Director. So Professor Levinson and I are really excited about some of these ideas, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. I also just want to say, if you're interested in getting involved in some of these initiatives, I'm also active in something called the Center for AI and Digital Policy. I chair our faculty global academic network. So if you're working in this space and it's something that you get particularly interested in, I'm happy to introduce you to that team. And I also teach a lot of AI-related courses here on campus. So in the fall and the spring, I teach a course called iTech SIS 724, which is Advanced Text Analytics with AI and Machine Learning. One of my students happens to be in the back, Nabila, so thank you for being here. There may be more online as well. And then starting in this spring, in the fall and spring, I'll teach a new course called AI Principles and Technologies, and I'm really excited about that. So what I'd like to do for the next hour is first go through a little conceptual background and get to the point where we talk about some principles of prompt engineering. And part of what we will do is to lay the groundwork for why is prompting so important. Why do we want to focus on prompt engineering? So we'll spend a little bit of time in a conceptual overview, and then we'll switch at about 3 o'clock to hands-on tutorial. Now this is your time, so we can switch between this if you want. But I'm really looking forward to sharing both parts of this with you. So first off, some people say prompt engineering is dead, right? So what do we know of as prompt engineering? What do you think prompt engineering is? Anybody here want to share?
Like the text you put into ChatGPT for it to give you something?
That's exactly a prompt. That is exactly right. The text that you put in is something like ChatGPT, that's your prompt. So anybody want to expand on that? And what do we mean by prompt engineering? So it's taking that prompt and pushing it to get as much as you can from the large language model that's behind, say, ChatGPT, in that case, the GPT. So prompt engineering is thinking about how do you craft your input into that model so that you can get as much out of it as possible. That's what we mean by prompt engineering. It sounds big and highfalutin in a sense, but that's what we mean. So some people are saying prompt engineering is dead. We have the capabilities now to talk to ChatGPT, and so I wanted to do a quick little example of that. So, and this is something some of you may not be familiar with. And it's not there. We're on multiple screens here, but I'm going to just show you right here. So, hello, ChatGPT. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How's your morning going?
My morning went well. I taught a data science class this morning, and now I should say this morning, it's this afternoon, we're in a session on prompt engineering. Do you think prompt engineering is dead?
Glad to hear your morning went well. Prompt engineering has definitely evolved, especially with how advanced language models have become. Some say it's dead because models are getting better at understanding natural language without needing highly specific prompts. But, on the other hand, effective prompts can still make a big difference in getting nuanced or complex outputs, especially in technical or creative contexts. What's your take on it?
Well, I'm giving a workshop right now on prompt engineering, so I think it's pretty important, even when you have the ability to talk to a large language model like I'm doing now.
That makes perfect sense. Even with powerful language models, the way you frame questions or requests can still shape the depth, clarity, and relevance of responses. It's great that you're helping others see the importance of refining their prompts. Are there any specific strategies you're highlighting in the workshop?
I am, but I'm going to get back to it right now, so thank you so much. So, this is one of the reasons that I don't think prompt engineering is dead. It's certainly nice to be able to talk to a large language model like that. How many of you have done that before? You've talked to your large language model or your chatbot? Nobody. Nabila. I tell you, the first time I saw it, I was blown away that you can have just this natural conversation back and forth. And so the idea that some people say that prompt engineering is dead is that if you can just have a conversation like that, isn't that enough? So I would say no, it's not enough, but it's certainly good that you can have those kinds of conversations. And because I'm going through all of this apparatus, it's a little bit slower, but especially depending on which model you choose, it can go back and forth almost like a fluid conversation. So the real key is that getting the most out of a large language model really does require very explicit, carefully designed prompts. So even in that voice conversation, the more you know about prompt engineering, the more that you'll be able to get out of a large language model. And so we'll talk more about that as we go along. Some people also say AI is dead. We're past the AI hype cycle and it's just overhyped and just securing new investment. And I think all of us feel like that's not exactly the case. Pardon me? Can somebody just make sure everybody's muted? Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean quickly by AI and what we mean by large language models and what has happened that has got us to this point where so much interesting development is happening around large language models. So when we look at this idea of AI, and one of my students this morning said AI started in 2022. And I said, no, it didn't. Some things happened in 2022 and 2017, but it didn't start in 2022. Artificial intelligence goes back to the mid-50s when the idea was, could we make intelligent machines and programs and that would help us achieve the kinds of tasks that we wanted to have. So artificial intelligence really created lots and lots of opportunities for us to automate a lot of processes and to really have an impact on how decisions could be made and so forth. Then we moved into an era of machine learning where we could then have our computers learning without being explicitly programmed. And this really helps us to get to the point where we can learn from training data and then we can build predictive models, and those models will operate outside of what we're able to do by just simply programming our machines. And then we moved into an era of deep learning, where you had multiple layers of networks and deep neural networks, which could get smarter and smarter with each layer of a neural network that your prompt sort of passes through. Each of those layers gets reduces the error that's coming out of your prompt and out of your input, and gets closer and closer and closer to reality and being more accurate. And so that's what we get out of this deep learning neural network-based process. With machine learning, we have supervised and unsupervised machine learning. Unsupervised machine learning lets us explore large amounts of data, particularly text-based data. Supervised machine learning is when we know what the outcome is, we know what the target is that we're trying to predict, and we're able to build models where we take lots and lots of training data and build a model. We look at what features, including features with text, that help us predict the outcome. And so when you think about the prompts that we're using now, that's a lot of what's happening because these large language models are trained on enormous amounts of text-based data. And so they're looking at developing probabilities of, if this prompt comes in, what's the likely probable next set of words or phrases or paragraphs. It's a probabilistic approach. They're just trained on enormously large data sets. And then, of course, as I said, with deep learning, this supervised machine learning approach happens on each of these levels. Each level that you go down in a deep neural network, it gets closer and closer, more and more accurate as you go through. So deep learning has achieved all kinds of advances in artificial intelligence, speech recognition, improved translation, digital assistants, self-driving cars, and so forth. So a lot of this happens in text analytics. I've been teaching text analytics for about 15 years now. I get so excited about large amounts of text and natural language processing, being able to understand and examine and explore large amounts of textual data. So this also then allows us to build language models. So when we think about language models, we're able to say, if we had a set of sentences, could we look at what the sentences are, what the parts of speech are, and what all of these different parts of speech are in something called the Penn Tree Bank parts of speech tagger. So we can go through huge amounts of text, parse that text, make parts of speech, and be able to identify things like named entities within that text, and understanding that text very, very well. Again, bringing that to various kinds of models like our deep learning models like long short-term memory networks, convolutional neural networks, and that brings us to what did happen in 2017. So in 2017, this process of thinking about artificial intelligence, you see that our chart here stops at 2017. So I'm sure somebody here can tell me what development happened in 2017 that has transformed what we now call generative AI. No? Well, it was called the transformer. So in 2017, there was a paper that came out from Google researchers, another deep learning model that's called the transformer. And the original transformer model that got a lot of attention was called BERT, bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. But the innovation in the deep learning model was a transformer. It was a way of going through those networks and going backwards and forwards, increasing the context so that you could learn more and more about your prompt and more about what the response should be. So BERT is something that you'll see frequently referred to as one of the earliest of these transformer models. The T in BERT, the bidirectional encoder representations by transformers, you'll see that T in a lot of different models, just like the T in GPT, ChatGPT, that's a transformer model. So even though we focus on GPT, on ChatGPT, remember ChatGPT is a chat bot, which is an interface to multiple large language models. So OpenAI developed a number of large language models. ChatGPT now, when most of you probably started using ChatGPT, you had an option of 3 or 3.5, and then 4, and then 4.0, 4.01. All of those are different large language models. Each one is trained differently. They're trained on different data. And what's nice is that you have communities like Hugging Face, which makes a lot of these LLMs available to whoever wants to use them in an open manner. So when we start talking about using, let's say, a chatbot, that's a nice user-friendly interface to the large language model that's behind it. So before you start using the chatbot, so just raise your hand if you've used ChatGPT before. So mostly everybody, I would assume, right? So one of the things that you can do is go in and change the model to decide which model you want to use. So it used to be that if you had the paid version, you could use 4. If you didn't have the paid version, you could use 3.5. And then when the newer models came out, you could have access to them, but you would be limited in how long you would be able to use those models and so forth. Now they've become a lot more open and let you choose which model you want to use. And you're likely to get quite a few different responses based on which type of model you choose. So I would encourage you to start thinking about when you go into any kind of a chatbot to select the model and experiment a little bit with what we're going to talk about today, different prompts, and see what you get from different models. So when ChatGPT, OpenAI came out with its new model 401, does anybody remember what was special about that model? So it talked about chain of thought reasoning. So the model now will start thinking as you ask it a question. So if you go to 4.01 and you ask a question, you'll see it thinking and unfolding the steps that it's going through as it's answering your question. So the thing for us to keep in mind is that if you look at this transformer model on the right-hand side of our screen, and I don't know where my cursor is, so I'm going to point in real life here. So that's a transformer model that we're looking at. This came from the paper that was called Attention is All You Need. The real key is right here, the inputs that go into that process. So my friend here, that was the first person to answer about the text that you're typing in, that's your prompt that starts this process. So the first thing the model has to do is to understand your prompt. So it wants to make sure it's trying to understand what you're asking so that it knows how to get the best response possible from the model. Now, there are times, frequently, when the chatbot itself will transform your prompt into something that is better suited for it. So it's going to help you with the prompt that it creates. But it's always better if you know some of the principles of prompt engineering so you can create your own prompts and you can get the most out of these models. So 2 more things that I want to share. So first is one of these newer approaches to getting a lot out of a large language model is called RAG. How many of you have heard about RAG before? Excellent. Nabila has. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So if anybody's heard anything about large language models and beware, and they all have a little warning at the bottom, right? What do they tell you to beware of? Hallucinations, right? That it can make up data sometimes. The newer models have gotten better at not hallucinating, but every time you use a large language model, all of you have used it, you haven't seen the little fine print at the bottom that says be careful because this may not be real and that you should always double check, triple check everything that it's giving you. So that's because of these hallucinations. So again, they've gotten a lot better. So one of the things about retrieval augmented generation is that it's able to combine what's called a retrieval system into a RAG application. So it can go and grab information. Particularly what's important about this is information that you put in. So in a RAG application, you can take documents that you've written or PDFs or Word documents, Google Docs, Google spreadsheets. You can put them all in, and now you have the LLM that's interacting with those documents to give you insights about those documents. So it's taking the power of the LLM, but it's using those documents that you've put in to augment its responses. And the nice thing about most of these RAG systems is it's not fine-tuning the model, so it's not changing the model. And supposedly, it's also not, any of the documents that you make available are not going out into the world to be used for future training or anything like that. So those documents that you select will help to ground truth and reduce hallucinations that you might be facing. All right? So there are a number of these RAG applications that are now available, and I'm going to show you one in particular. But one is called NotebookLM. Has anybody heard of that one? Excellent. So NotebookLM is from Google, and it's free. One of the things that we always have to worry about with companies that are in the commercial space is that something that might start off free might eventually become a paid service. And if you start relying on this, which I suspect that you will, what happens when they start charging for it or they take it away? So it's really nice that Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook, has really tried to keep opening up this space for open models and open access. So this is pretty complicated, but OpenAI, the company behind GPT, the Generalized Pre-trained Transformer for ChatGPT, that was supposed to be a counterweight to the commercial AI companies, Meta and Google and Microsoft and so forth. But because of the arrangements that have happened, it's now been pulled into the commercial side. And it's really interesting that Meta has been really pushing for open access. So they, a couple of days ago, released NotebookLM. So Llama is the name of some of the LLMs that come from Meta, all of which are public. And so NotebookLM is similar to NotebookLM, which we're going to look at in a minute, but it's all open source. You can use all of the Meta models within it. So I don't know where my cursor is. There it is. Okay. So let's take a look now of some of these generative AI tools that you've probably seen around. So looking at ChatGPT and Claude. So let me just do a quick little show of hands, and let's see if I can see the participants here as well. So raise your hand if you use ChatGPT, virtually and physically if you can. I see Nanette, Professor Levinson here in the room. Everybody's used ChatGPT. I use it too, so I'll keep my hand up. All right, lower your hand. How many of you use Claude? So Claude is another chatbot which gives you access to multiple LLMs that come from the company Anthropic. So if you haven't been using Claude, I highly encourage you to take a look. So remember when I showed you all those different models? Each of those models is sort of better at certain things. And so being able to figure out which one is best for coding problems, which one is best for creative writing problems, which one is best for travel planning type problems. Now, all of them will say they can handle all of that, and they can, but some are better at those tasks than others. And so you'll start to find which ones you like, and new features keep coming out. So one of the things that Claude does is it has projects, so you can make projects and group your prompts together and output. And it also has what it calls artifacts, but these are what it creates afterwards. And it can handle screenshots, so you can take screenshots of problems, and it can read those screenshots and so forth. So if you haven't used Claude, I highly encourage you to take a look at it as a possible LLM for you to use. So let's talk now about prompt engineering, what I call the art and science of prompt engineering. And these are a couple of principles that are going to be particularly important for you, and we'll start to practice them in a moment. So the first key thing is to think about this prompt itself, this input text that you're writing. And the reason that we're writing them, as we said, when our friend here answered, is to be able to get the best response from an LLM reflecting what it is that we really want, what we really are trying to get out of the model. So I'm going to say this in this way. Many people start to use these chatbots almost as if they are a search engine. And so you type in pretty simple queries. It's perfectly fine to do that. And in fact, most of the search engines these days are powered by one of these large language models. So that's essentially what's happening anyway. But if you do that, you're only scratching the surface of what an LLM can actually provide. So it's fine to do that, but I'm going to tell you a few more things to be able to go beyond that. So one of the things that you want to think about is prompting. So how many of you have heard of a 0-shot, 1-shot, and few-shot or multi-shot prompt? Nope. So the idea here is to essentially give the model an example of what you're looking for, and that's called a shot. So a 0-shot prompt is a prompt that doesn't give the model any example. So you're just letting it go and try to figure out what it is that you're asking. So if you give it a 1-shot, even a 1-shot prompt, if you say, this is what I'm interested in, here's an example, either the way it's written or the way it's framed or the way it's structured, and say, give me my answers using this example, that shot. That will already strengthen what it gives back to you, and it's you deciding, crafting your prompt, engineering your prompt so that you're getting out of it what you want. Of course, you can also have a multi-shot prompt. So you can give it multiple examples, and it will also give you back, use that to give you back more specificity with what you're asking. But that's the tip of the iceberg. So let's go into some of these principles. So the first key principle is to write clear and specific instructions. So rather than just a simple question, be clear about what you want the LLM to focus on, specify the tone that you want the LLM to take. Do you want it to take on a persona, and any other specifics that it should consider? And don't confuse writing clearly with writing short. So we had a meeting the other day, and one of the participants told us that some of their prompts are 3 pages long. 3-page long prompts, right? Now, I have written some prompts that have not been 3 pages, but they've taken 3 days for the LLM to process. So it went away and really crafted some responses. So the first thing is about the instructions themselves. So being clear and specifying the tone. What do you think we mean by the tone? This is kind of funny. Yes? Go ahead.
So sometimes I ask ChatGPT, can you make the tone more simple or straightforward? Just because sometimes I feel like it gives excess information that I do not need, and describes it in a way that's too descriptive. So that's what I asked for.
Excellent. So you can shape the tone of the response in terms of, do you want it? Did somebody online answer? Nabila, can you help me with that? If somebody online answers or wants to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. So you can specify the tone that you want your responses to come back in. Do you want them to come back in a professional manner, a lighthearted manner, in a poem, in a joke? So you can set the tone. So I don't use that as much as I use the persona. So the persona is, you can tell it about you and you can tell it about itself. So you can tell the model, you are an expert in X, whatever it is you're interested in. And so now you're getting the model to start thinking of itself in that way. I'm going to use these terms. I know I'm anthropomorphizing this predictive model here, but it starts to think about how it's responding based on that persona, and then by the tone, if you want to, be supportive, be critical, be encouraging, those kinds of things you can put into the prompt, and it'll change what you get back. So the persona is really important. And so for some of my students who are here, or those of you who are trying to think about how do you use these tools to support your coding efforts. Again, the more specific you can be to tell the model you are an expert Python programmer, or you're an expert R programmer doing data analytics. So Nabila, I go so far as to tell it, I'm using RStudio as my IDE. I'm coding in a Quarto document. This is what I'm trying to do. Or this is a problem that I'm having. Or here are error messages that I'm receiving. And so the more specific and detailed your prompt, the better it's going to be at giving you answers back. Secondly, the big point is give the LLM time to think. Now, again, I'm going to continue this anthropomorphizing. So these models, every time you send in a request, you're using up tokens and you're using up time, computational time. And that's why those of you who are using a free service, even if you have access to, say, ChatGPT 4, if you keep using it, it will tell you you've reached the maximum of your tokens until 4 o'clock, or something like that. That's because every time you're interacting with it, you're sending tokens, and it's trying to remember them as well. And that's why you can have longer and longer and longer chat prompts and chat sessions. But it's trying to remember all of that while it's giving you helpful responses. So the computational time of the LLM is valuable. And so it tries to get rid of you as soon as possible. So you ask a question, it shoots an answer back to you, and it's going to try to go on and do something else. Right? So until GPT 4.01 came out with this chain of thought reasoning, which now sort of slows it down by default, you would have to slow it down with your prompt. So how would you slow it down with your prompt? So if you take a prompt and you break it into multiple sections, and you say, I want you to think about this part first, this part second, then do this, then look at this, then bring it back to me after referring to this document, you're making the model slow down and spend more time trying to do what? Understand what you're asking and what's the right response that comes from that. So that's the second key principle. So write clear instructions and give the LLM time to think. As I said, sometimes you will have where the LLM is doing a prompt transformation for you. So if you've never done this before, once you finish something, go back and ask the LLM, show me the prompt that you used to give me this result. And it'll show you how it took your prompt and transformed it into something that it thought was useful to get an answer. Okay? Now, I want to move to the hands-on right about on time. We're until 3:30, right, Anna? Okay. All right. So what I want to do is a couple of things because I really want to get to the RAG part. So first off, the idea is to compare many different LLMs and many different ways of interacting with the LLMs. So Anna knows we've been talking about this. So part of what I want to do is to be helpful for people who only want to use what we call a GUI, a graphical user interface, like ChatGPT. That's all you want to do, right? You want to have something you can see, you can upload documents to, you can upload your prompt, upload photos, get out of it what you want. It's very powerful, and with this prompt engineering, you'll be able to get even more out of it than you thought. Each one of those different, let's call them chatbots, you have access to different models. So I encourage you to choose and compare between those different models within that particular chatbot. But if you want to try some of the other models, you have to go to another chatbot. So if you're on ChatGPT, you're going to get access to GPT 4, 4.0, 4.1 preview, I think is what it's called. So 3 models I think are available now. Let's just flip back over and see. It's a little tough here. I can't see anything. Where did you go? Oh, there it is. Okay, we'll come back to it. I can't find it. So choose those options. But if you want to use Gemini or Gemma or Opus, any of these other large language models, you have to move to those chatbots. So the other way to access these tools is through another GUI. So you're going to look at AI Studio, Google's AI Studio, and NotebookLM. So this is a GUI interface, but it becomes a little more complicated. So you do have the option of choosing models, of adjusting the model's temperature. Does anybody know what that is? Have you heard that before? So large language models have a setting that go from 0 to 2, with 1 being right about in the middle as kind of a neutral setting. So the lower the number, the more conservative the model gets, which means the more it focuses on prediction and relying on the most highly predicted outcome in its training set. So if you went all the way down to 0, you're giving the model no flexibility. And so, Anna, we were talking about how would you want to reproduce a problem? So you would want to set the model to 0 and put the same prompt in. You should get the same prompt out each time. But if you keep it at the default, which is 1, it's trying to be balanced. It's trying to be a little conservative and a little flamboyant. So it kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility. As you go past 1 towards 2, you're giving it license to be more creative, less constrained. And so the responses will be different as you change the temperature on the model. Okay? So ChatGPT, to my knowledge, doesn't let you change the settings in the temperature settings in the chatbot, but AI Studio would, for example. The last way that I want to talk about it is accessing these models through an API. So on your computer, if you're using something like RStudio, you can set up, and Nabila did this about 2 weeks ago, where we had a lab where you go in and you go to Hugging Face and you have it call the model that you're asking for. You tell it which model, you tell it the temperature you want, and you can get it to respond in that way. So there are all these ways that you can access these models, and it just depends on where you are, what you're comfortable with, right? All right, so compare the models. This is something I want you to pay attention to. If you add the same prompt and you send it to Opus 3, GPT-4, or Bard, you're likely to get different results. So for example, if you were to take this prompt that I wrote here, so look at some of the principles that I'm starting to talk about in this prompt. You are an expert management consultant. So that's giving it persona, right? You have substantial experience focusing on leadership and change management within large organizations related to contracting with the United States Department of Defense. A recent request for proposals, RFP, has emerged that meets your interests and expertise. The RFP is focused on implementing generative AI tools within the United States Navy. Outline a short first draft of my response to this RFP. So That's a detailed prompt. So I don't know how many of your prompts are that detailed. Are you writing like that with your prompts? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my prompts are like, before I ask ChatGPT to do something, I always make sure I tell it how to do it first.
Outstanding. Excellent. Anybody else moving in that direction as well? Not really? Yep, that's okay. You do.
Well, I like to give it kind of like an example, or sometimes I like to say, oh, I'm looking for something along the lines of this, or whatever. I think that's like the way I usually go.
So now what do we call that? You know what it's called now, right? A one-shot prompt.
Yes.
Or a multi-shot prompt. Exactly. So that's great. So here in this prompt, you have a lot of the principles that we've already started to talk about. So you have a persona, you have a tone, you're very specific. But if you were to submit that same prompt to 3 different models, you're going to get at least 3 different responses. So GPT-4 generated 512 words, this response. Claude 3 Opus, 399 words in this response. And Gemini, 510 words. So I encourage you to explore these different models. Don't get locked just in one, and start to figure out which one works best for you in which situations. Now, a few more principles, and then we're going to switch over to looking at some of these tools. So write clear and specific instructions. We talked about that. Give the model time to think. So you can tell it all kinds of things. You can tell it to summarize and convert the text that you put in into different languages. It's multilingual. It's multimodal. So you can have it create images. You can have it create tables. You can have it output in JSON format. You can say, give this to me in French. Professor Levinson, that might be really helpful. We can have it do things like that. Have more prompts. So create more prompts. Thank you, Mac. I saw your text here. So you can use one-shot and multi-shot prompts. You can upload documents. You can give it links and say, here's a link I want you to take a look at, or here's a document, 2 or 3 documents I want you to look at. So those are all practices, principles. The last one I want to talk about is iterative prompt development. And this is something that sounds so straightforward, but many people don't practice this. So if you write a prompt and you get a response, some people say that's it. They just stop there. Well, the reality is that you have to be persistent at pushing the model over and over again sometimes, refining your prompt to get it closer and closer to what you want. So it's rare that your very first attempt is going to give you the best prompt and the best result. So iterative prompt development is something that you want to practice over and over and over again. So start with what you want to achieve, be as specific as possible, follow some of these other techniques, but then go back and do it again, refine the prompt. So is that something that you're doing as well?
I would say that I tend to, when I don't like a response, or that I feel it's not good enough to what I was looking for, I do go back and I ask it. I was like, no, this is not what I'm looking for. Can you try this instead, or can you look at it this way? Or I try to change up a little bit or be more specific.
Excellent. So I would say continue that practice, and keep in mind, you're in charge of the LLM. It's not in charge of you. So keep pushing it. Push it again and say, that's not what I asked for. You can, if you look at the second column here, you can tell it, give me the prompt in 50 words or less, or you could say, give it to me in 2 pages, expand. If you're coding Nabila, so one of the things you can say is, explain this line of code to me. Explain each line of code to me. What's happening? What is this doing? And so you can be supported in this process by using these kinds of prompts. So I'm going to show you something fun here and show you an iterative prompt development process I went through myself. So some of you know I'm a sailor. I like to boat. And I wanted to see, when I first started looking at the image generation capabilities. So I said in my initial prompt, could have been better, generate an image of a 40-foot sloop-rigged sailboat on the Chesapeake Bay, under the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Please include a white hull, tan canvas, Bimini Dodger, in the cockpit include an African-American skipper, wife, and son, and name the vessel Transcend. That's the name of my boat. So look at number 1, and it has all kinds of problems. So back to what we were just saying, push the prompt, push the LLM. It gave me like six or seven people on the boat. You have multiple US flags on the back. The sails are all weird. So I said, nope, that's not it. So I went back iteratively. It gave me number 2. And what's wrong with that picture? The sails are backwards, so half of the boat is sailing forwards, the other half is sailing backwards, and you have a bunch of people that are not supposed to be in the cockpit. So that didn't help. I pushed it again, and so it ended up with this, which is pretty darn close to what I was looking for, what I had in my mind, but it took me 3 times to get there. And so this idea of pushing is what you really want to be able to do. So now I'm going to slip ahead here, and I want to talk about RAG. So RAG is one of the newer ways to get more out of these models from a GUI interface. The goal is to make the responses more relevant to you, contextually to your interests and your needs. So the NotebookLM came from Google Labs. So there was a writer called Steven Johnson, who was the executive editor at Google Labs. He's a world-renowned writer in innovation and technology, and he keeps lots and lots of notes. He used, what's that thing that everybody used to keep notes on, like Evernote? So Evernote, lots and lots of digital books, like all of his Kindle library that he had all the highlights and so forth. So he wanted to be able to say, kind of like, what do I know? And so he went to Google and they said, yeah, let's work on something. And so they developed NotebookLM. So with a RAG system, you can decide what documents do you want to augment the system, the retrieval, or the generation rather. So in his case, he put all of his Evernote notes. He put all of his, there's a system you can use to go to your Kindle library and have it export all of your highlighted portions of the Kindle library. That's huge, right? So he had all of those. He had all of his book proposals. He had all of these things that he put in. And so then, and if you look here, it's multimodal, so you can put in PDFs, URLs, YouTube videos, comments, Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Sheets. All of these documents can go into a RAG system. So you decide what's useful. If you are a professor, you could think about, let's put all of my syllabi in, or all of the reading for this semester for this class, or whatever you might want to do. And you can start to interact with this system. So with this approach, the documents don't leave. They're not used to train or fine-tune the model, and they can auto-generate content. So I want to show you this quickly here. So what you're looking at here, so this is an article, Professor Levinson, you'll like this. So this is an, oh gosh, you can't see it. We're supposed to be mirroring my screen here. So, so we have an article that just came out. No, it's on my screen here, but, oh, okay. Where we used natural language processing in R and Python to analyze 170 documents, state report documents, on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It takes a long time to develop that code and to analyze the documents that way. Enter a RAG system. So on the left-hand side, you see 47 documents. So the only limitation that I have found with this system, one of the major limitations I found with this system is that you can only load 50 documents, but it doesn't tell you how long the documents have to be, so you can double up if you needed to or something like that. But you have 50 documents, and you can decide if you want to select or deselect any of those documents. Once you put those documents in, it will generate for you why? Okay, let me see here. Now I'm going to be upside down here. Okay. So you go to, so once you load the documents in, you can go to this notebook guide. Now with the notebook guide, you can click on, this is instantly after uploading the documents. You can say, create an FAQ for me, a study guide, a table of contents, a timeline, or a briefing doc. It also gives you some suggested prompts. They're not as good as our prompts, but they give you some suggested prompts here, right? And so you can say, click on this FAQ, and it takes a few minutes. It's got 50 long documents, and it's going to generate a new note here. And I may have reached my rate limit. Okay, so here's my FAQ about these 47 documents. So, how are the rights of persons with disabilities protected at the institutional level in Angola, in Belgium, in Finland, and so forth, right? So, so you think about asking that question to, say, ChatGPT, it's going to go out into its training data and try to give you a response. This is giving you a response based on the documents that you uploaded. So it's narrowing the possible choices to what exactly you're asking for. So you can create these sort of FAQs, you can create the study guide and so forth, but this was the feature that was taking the world by storm, which is this, what they call an audio overview, which sounds so innocuous. Audio overview. So when I did this with 50 documents, it took 10 minutes to generate this.
Hey everyone, buckle up because we're taking this deep dive global talking disability rights
around the world. And we've got a treasure trove to dig into excerpts from actual UN reports. 18 countries worth, no less.
18. I mean, talk about a crash course, but it's not just about knowing the laws on paper, right? It's about spotting those aha moments.
Exactly. The surprising connections that help us really understand, what's working, what needs a rethink, that kind of thing.
Totally. Because we could all probably name a few basic disability rights, but how's it really playing out?
In different cultures, with different resources, different histories, that's what we're diving into.
Okay, so no surface skimming here. Let's dive into some specifics. What kind of standout approaches are we going to uncover?
Well, one that caught my eye is Switzerland. They're going beyond the basics.
Okay, so it's digging into the documents, creating this interactive two-person podcast that they're calling an audio overview. A two-person podcast, 10 minutes long, about your documents. So if you were trying to learn something and you put 40 different articles about that, and you generated this audio overview and went back and forth, it would be absolutely amazing. So one last thing I want to show you is, so this is Google's AI Studio. And so this is what we actually used in the article I was just talking about. So you see, you still have a GUI. So I saw some faces when we were saying, do you want to do this on your computer and program the API and so forth? I think some people are saying, no, I don't want to do that. So it's still a GUI, but this is called Google's AI Studio. So what the AI Studio allows you to do, and it's also by Google, you can now go in and you can select the model. So you can use Gemini 1.5 Pro, 1.5 Pro O2, Gemini Flash. You keep scrolling down. You can use Gemma and then the preview models. So what's cool about this is that Gemini is Google's paid closed model that you can still use. So if you were trying to do this on your computer, to be able to use Gemini, you'd have to pay for it. But in this AI Studio, it's free. And then Gemma is their open source model, but you have all these different models to choose from. And you can go in and adjust the temperature. So the default is 1, and that's going to give us what? Do we remember? The temperature of 1, what's that going to give us? Nabila?
It's going to have a good balance between your data and
Right. So if we want to make it more predictable, which way should we go? Down.
Because
we want to make it more, yeah, we want to make it more conservative, more predictable, we want to go down. So you can go down to points down all the way to 0. And so when it's at 0, that's when, if you put the same prompt in every single time, it should give you more or less the same response. Now, Nabila, if we go the other direction, past 1, all the way up to 2, now it's going to be going exactly more random, less limited by its most highly predicted next answer. So it's pretty nice to be able to do this. And you can turn on code execution and more advanced settings and so forth. So Google's AI Studio is pretty awesome in and of itself. So I think I will stop there and see what questions we have in the audience or virtually. Yes?
So I was kind of thinking more so of the policy aspect on how you believe the government should be regulating this field of AI, and also about like the ethical aspect on the accessibility to these like AI models and how they can be for the public, or if that's a possibility.
Yep. So the question was really about AI regulation, governmental regulation and so forth, and accessibility and access to the tools and the models and so forth. So one thing I didn't show you, I thought about it and I decided not to, but I'll show you now. If I can find my cursor. I'll just go back this way. You ever heard of this? PDOOM. So have you ever heard of this, AGI? So this is really somewhat controversial. People who are very actively involved in the space of AI research, from OpenAI, Microsoft, people who are in the labs doing the research are torn between, will we get to this idea called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, where these models can do any task that a human would be able to accomplish. So that, I spend a lot of time talking to these models about data analytics, as you might imagine. But somebody else might spend a lot of time talking to these models and they would respond as an expert in literature, in art, in history, and microbiology, and physics, and so forth and so on. So these models are starting to know a lot more than any one human would be able to know. So much about so many things that they're moving in this space. So you'll hear lots of these researchers talk about, do they think we can get to AGI? And the question is really, they don't think, it's not a question of that we won't get to AGI. It's really, when will we get to AGI? And some of the most recent estimates are around 4 years. That if you look at how good these models are, and look at what I just showed you, generating a podcast in 10 minutes from 50 detailed documents, and then being able to make decisions about all kinds of complicated materials, do we get to AGI? So related to discussions of AGI usually are questions of PDOOM. So PDOOM is the probability that you think these models will evolve to the point that there's some level of human extinction that could occur. Now, when I ask, I don't know. I'm not at the heart of AI research. I'm pushing the envelope as much as I can, but I'm not like the researchers at Google DeepMind or Google Labs or OpenAI. But those people, almost all of them have a number that they associate with PDOOM. So they know that this is dangerous, and as long as it stays in, little sandbox systems and so forth, they feel like we can continue to control it. But what happens when it gets out? So did you see what else happened last week? Another big development. Claude came out with, did you see?
No, it was something else.
Okay, I know it's time to go. Claude came out with what's called computer control. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of agentic workflows? Like an agent? So the newest thing is for you to be able to make an agent that you can tell it to do these things, and then it goes and does them for you. So it's available now on your computer through Claude, through Anthropic, and you can tell it, go check on my email, do this, see if anybody's inviting me to a meeting, find the best way to get to the meeting, go and book a hotel, open up. So you can tell it to do all of that. Right now, that's sandboxed in a very carefully controlled space. But if it gets outside of that space and it starts making decisions on your computer, there's a danger in that. And again, the people who know about these things are warning us that there are dangers here. When OpenAI lost all of its top leadership, or when Sam Altman left or was fired, that was partially because of should you go fast and break things, as Facebook used to say, and forget about the consequences, or should you be careful and perhaps slow down and be less competitive? So the bottom line is that we absolutely need to think about both guarding against some of the challenges that come in this space, some of the bias that comes in all that training data that we talked about, but we still need to use and embrace these tools because there's so much possibility that comes from it. So it's about balancing, really. So sorry, Anna, you had a question.
No, it was just, I thought you were going to mention the resignation of the GAI officer of OpenAI.
Yeah.
That's related, right?
It's related. And so, these companies and the people who are close to this are saying we have to be careful. We are, potentially putting ourselves at danger as we let these machines, go open on our machines. So I just wanted to say, in order to move forward, if you are a student or a staff member or other faculty members, if you want to take any of my classes, I'd be happy to have you. I do a lot of I feel like exciting work in this space. We're also part of the NIST AI Safety Consortium. I do have a GitHub repo that I try to make some of these scripts and so forth available in R and Python. So if you're interested, send me an email. I can add you. I listen to lots and lots of podcasts. The one I'm listening to right now is Acquired. It's a 5-hour podcast, deep dive on Meta, which is absolutely fascinating. The first time I heard about them was a podcast on NVIDIA, which was absolutely amazing, which are the GPUs, the graphical programming unit, CPU. Well, it's been 4 o'clock this morning, Nabila. So the GPUs are multi-threaded as opposed to singular threaded like a CPU. And so this is what's powering all of these large language models. So Acquired is really phenomenal. There's also this thing called 100 Days of AI, where if you sign up for this, every single day you get prompted with kind of a new little tool to learn, a new something to practice. And so after 100 days, you now have lots and lots of new cool skills under your belt. There's lots of online courses. So Hugging Face, which I talked about before, has courses. Deep Learning has courses. And then there's something called Data Robot, which is automated machine learning and AI. It's a commercial tool. And this is why I like our students to learn the open source software approaches. But these are some very, very powerful tools. So thank you for your time today here in person and online. I hope this was helpful. And I look forward to being a resource to you and hanging out whenever you want to. So happy to talk more about this. So thank you very much. you.